As I'm sure you guys know, I've been really enjoying my time with a specific fan game recently, one that I've made a couple videos on and that I love to play in my free time. If you know me, you know this game is SMBZ-G. If you don't, I'll explain. SMBZ-G is Super Mario Bros. Z, the game. It's a fan game rendition of the popular sprite animation series known by its formal title of Super Mario Bros. Z, which is a crossover of Super Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog, which has its own original storyline, some unique and original characters, and an amazing overall tone and execution which really allows the viewer to become entranced, almost in its well-told story and execution of cinematography. But however, we're here for the creation made by Zethros, the fan-made fighting game known as SMBZ-G for short. The game may have a small following. It's not exactly a game played by tens of thousands of people, but it is still something special, and hopefully this video brings more awareness to the fan game, for better or for worse. However, despite the small following, it still has quite the competitive scene within its Discord, with users practicing daily, and I will still continue to vote for a leaderboard of the Discord. Like most games, it still has a reason for its well-found success. Similar to Project 06 and other fan games, it has a very well-renowned reason for its success in varying degrees. SMBZ-G is a fighting game, and one of the first things you'll notice upon booting up the game is the character selection. We have Mario, Luigi, Yoshi, Sonic, Shadow, Koopa Bros, Axum Rangers X, Mechasonic, Basilisk, and this disappointment to society. Of course, the characters all have their own unique playstyles, movesets, and everything that helps them stand apart, which leads us into the gameplay. This game has by far the most unique approach to fighting gameplay I've ever seen. By borrowing multiple different ideas and implementing many different unique quirks, combos, and changing them to the liking of the creator, you end up with an engaging system that allows the right amount of neutral play, sometimes, and allows different approaches to almost every character. I'm fighting Shadow, gotta play it safe. Fighting Mario, outrange him and pressure him. Fighting Yoshi, stop having fun. Overall, the game's balance is well done, and despite the upcoming Cataclysm, where Zethros is nerfing every character to remove the combo-focused gameplay, I was genuinely surprised on a first impression how every character was well balanced. Oh yeah, I should probably address that. Yes, this game has a rather heavy combo game right now. Not every character has a touch of death bad, but still to the point it could rub some people the wrong way. After all, combos work very differently in this game. Most games have a combo system usually following the same pattern, a conjunction of hits performed within a time limit either with or without taking damage. However, this game decided to throw a unique twist by making it instead so combos end when the other opponent's hit stun is over. It essentially works like Smash Bros. Training system. It took the term true combo and instead made it the basis. For example, this is a true combo. And this is an SMBZ-G combo. The main basis is that the main basis is the same that hit stun. The main basis is the same that hit stun determines the combo, and while I say that I haven't seen it before despite having a comparison, instead with Smash the focus is on combos done between hit stun that are done between reads on the player, and SMBZ-G has this. Due to this, the game has a very combo-oriented playstyle where your entire goal is to get that first hit and keep the focus on maximum damage output, usually ending with a cinematic or full stun rush. Inside the game, there is a stun bar and the intensity meter. Both are filled by how much damage is done throughout the battle, but the stun bar drains faster when the player is not currently being damaged, keeping the player motivated to continue attacking so they have a chance to deal that full stun rush to get a lot of damage output. The intensity bar is where things get interesting. It fills up over time and based on damage, and when it hits full, normal clashes, which is when two attacks with the same priority collide and they bounce back, turn into bursts, requiring the player to get to press the buttons to win and gain the advantage. And whoever first uses their down Z move gets a critical strike and gets a cinematic rush occurs, which when the movement rush update comes out, this video will be outdated. The game also has a similar moveset design of that to Smash, with directional attacks, special attacks, which in this game are Z attacks, and some of its own glory with the supers, which are character-specific moves using the energy bar at the bottom. Using all of this, the game creates an interesting dynamic by using all of these unique mechanics to create a fighting game experience like never before through simple means of game design, to each their own. However, despite some of these flaws, the game manages to stand on its own and offer an engaging experience by combining many different gameplay styles and accommodating for players of any skill level. If both players are relatively new, the game is relatively neutral focused and has a lot of back and forth. If both players are skilled, the challenge comes from finding your opening to strike and deal heavy damage through means learned over time. Now, one thing that, in my own opinion, holds this fan game back is its lack of stage variety. Now, I don't mean themes, as this game succeeds in providing memorable locations from the show and bringing back these nostalgic tracks back to really give a good time reminiscing. But all these stages are the same. Flat ground, where each player just walks along and jump along. But if we compare this to Smash Bros. Again, even only tournament legal stages, we get to see a high stage variety. For example, we could choose Basic Battlefield, which benefits combo-focused characters and characters with good air game. But if we choose Town and City, we're now forced to play around and teammate with the platforms disappearing and adapt relatively quickly. In this current build of the game, every single stage is equal, the same, with no variety. One fun thing about fighting games with the stage variety is the time of adapting, not just to your opponent, but to every aspect of gameplay. If we put Town and City in SMBZ-G without fall deaths, we now have a game where each player is trying to adapt to the platforms disappearing and play around this. Now, granted, this game is not a platform fighter, so this example may not line up to, for example, Street Fighter, but even then, I think this game suffers from only learning the player. Once you've learned the player, it's about countering him, not countering anything else. Of course, this could really be considered a more personal choice of gameplay, as not people prefer the style of the only obstacle being the player they fight, but to each their own in this regard, as I think maybe adding some sort of stage hazard specific to the episode the hazard is based off of. For example, Yoshi's Forest randomly flashing red and changing to the burning forest, which may slowly deal damage to both players for a short amount of time, would be an interesting idea to explore. Nevertheless, the game is successful at so many fundamental aspects of gameplay to the point that this small thought doesn't affect the amount of fun I'll still be having. As much as I could delve into every character, how they play, and everything, I might save it for another video essay if this video does well. With that, I have an exclusive interview with the developer Zethros, who has agreed to answer a variety of questions about this fun fan game. With that, here they are. What inspired you the most to make the SMBZ-G game we know and love today?
I was always into game development since I was a kid, 5 years old. I don't remember exactly. At one point, I was playing a game and wasn't satisfied with it and said to myself and my brother, I can do better than this. From there, both I and my brother got into game development. We first started with Game Maker. We made several games, mostly 2D action, fighting games. I wish I still had them around, but the hard drive that had them crashed, so they are gone forever. Anyway, eventually when I was around 9 years old, I was looking for an idea to work on and eventually stumbled upon SMBZ on Newgrounds, and fell in love with it. Only episode 1 to 3 was out at the time, and already I wanted to make a game for it. I tried a couple times but didn't get it quite right. As the years went on, more SMBZ episodes dropped and I used them as inspiration to continue making a game for it. Each new episode would fuel my enthusiasm. I eventually made a decent working product with Mario vs Sonic that, over many updates, became the infamous and quat SMBZ-V06 and quat, which was mostly based on episode 6. It was hosted on Game Makers and Quat, Yo-Yo Games and Quat website. It got about 30,000 plays before the website shut down. But to answer the question specifically, what inspired me to make SMBZ-G was, of course, SMBZ itself. It had this level of action and high-quality choreography that played into a lot of video game tropes and styles, especially from fighting games, which I grew up on. That really hit a sweet spot for me. Coupled with my interest in game development, it made the perfect candidate to make a game for, since I can make the gameplay fit very close to the source material, so it feels like you're playing an actual episode. Furthermore, when I was around 13 or so, I made a promise to myself that I would make an SMBZ game that is super cool, and I was never satisfied with SMBZ-V06. So after college, I had the technical skills to really make it a reality, so I did.
Around what time frame was the original SMBZ game that was scrapped up to version 0.6?
The very first SMBZ game was probably 2005. It was barely a game though. The first playable one I put on Yo-Yo Games was around 2008. I worked on it till about 2010.
What made you abandon the original SMBZ game?
I abandoned SMBZ-V 0.6 because of a few reasons. Firstly, I was using GameMaker version 6 before GameMaker Studio, and it had a lot of scalability issues. Plus, I didn't know how to code, so the game's foundation was BAAD. I was using the drag and drop logic to make all the functionality. It was a ton of if statements. Each animation was a different object, so it was constantly destroying and recreating objects just to move or attack or do anything. It was a mess. Memory leaks, crashes. The code wasn't even shareable between player-controlled and CPU-controlled, which is why Mario could only be a player and Sonic could only be a CPU. It was BAAD. The project itself, as a result, was becoming really bloated. It took forever to load and build the game to test changes. Compatibility was starting to fail as newer versions of Windows were coming out. I didn't have source control and the whole project was pretty much one file, which if it ever became corrupted, would ruin all my progress. I had backups, but they were sometimes days old, so anytime the file got corrupted I would lose a lot of progress. It was bad. Secondly, it was taking a lot of time for little payout. The scalability issues were becoming more and more apparent, to the point where I knew I needed to rebuild it. Thirdly, I was starting college and I wanted to focus on that. I was learning programming in college, so once I got a better understanding of how coding worked, I realized even more so how bad the codebase was for the game. So once I graduated, I started looking into different game development tools that better suit a coder. I tried Construct, XNA, and finally, Unity, which I stuck with.
What do you use most as creative inspiration when making the current SMBZ-G?
What do I use most as creative inspiration? The source material, SMBZ, to be honest. I don't copy other fighting games like most game developers. I prefer to make original systems, games. With the case with SMBZ-G, the source material, SMBZ, resonates with me very well. I love Dragon Ball Z's action, but I hate the anime power creep issues they have with the shallow storytelling. SMBZ has the action but keeps the power scaling grounded and the storytelling concise and solid, with some moments of depth. Everyone has their ups and downs. It's not all about who transforms last. I love it. So in short, my creative inspiration comes from SMBZ and my own imagination.
What update and time period did you notice the player base to really begin to take off?
I don't remember, so I have to look at the statistics. Sometime around November 26, 2019, the first explosion of new players happened. I'm not sure what spiked it. Prior to that, I was just communicating with people on my unlisted version update announcement videos. Cosmic was one of the main people I spoke with a lot. Funny enough, around the time of the spike in player base, I was also asked many times to create a Discord server. So, on November 30th, 2019, I made the SMBZ-G Community Hub. If I had to guess what the explosion in popularity was about, I think players started making YouTube videos about it and it must have hit a sweet spot and mini trended around that time. Since then, the monthly active user count was a steady, healthy growth of enthusiastic people looking, hoping and praying that someone made a game based on SMBZ and then found SMBZ-G. Starting from 0, it slowly climbed up to around 150, from around July 2017 when I first made the game public. At that date, it exploded to 700 for the first time. After that it exploded to 1,130. It's been a healthy 650 or so, give or take 100, monthly active users.
What was your original vision for SMBZ-G?
My original vision of SMBZ had more movement rushes, assists and more than two-player action going on. It was more cinematic. It had items and destructible terrain, walls to break through. The cinematic stuff would be like Dragon Ball FighterZ, how they would fly into the fight and clash after someone gets defeated, or how cinematic situations like Frieza killing Krillin, and if Super Saiyan Goku is on your team, he has his Super Saiyan transformation scene play before the fight continues. Similarly with SS2 Team Gohan with Cell and Android 19. It was a lot. Very over the top.
What playstyle were you originally aiming for when making it?
The playstyle I was aiming for was more neutral heavy, less anime, Marvel vs. Capcom. Touch of death. I wanted mind games to play a bigger part in the fight. I have the opinion that games are better with more neutral heavy, as both combatants get to play more, thus forcing the other to think and be engaged more. This also has an added effect of making it more fun to spectate, as there is more to see and more surprises can happen.
In your own opinion, do you think people should play the game or read the Google Sites page first?
I think people should play the game first, rather than reading the Google site page, as the game is pretty easy to pick up and learn, and people learn better through doing than reading. Reading the sites page is nice after the fact to find out things you haven't realized after playing.
In your own imagination, how do you imagine first impressions going for those who refuse to read the sites page?
I imagine first impressions of the game of someone going in blind is, I don't know, I never thought of it, maybe underwhelmed at first. The attacks can feel sluggish and simple, like there isn't much to them at first. Depending on what game they are coming from, it may be jarring. I feel, though, once they fight a hard CPU, they will quickly realize what capabilities there are. And, hopefully, be encouraged to learn more and experiment, especially if they have a friend to play with. The clashing, intensity and burst mechanics will be especially hype for them. The first accidental full stun strike will be awesome for them as well. It'll be a and quat. Wah. Dot wah. What did I just do? And quat. Moment.
How do you feel about having to use Parsec to have your player base fight one another?
Having to use Parsec to play online is, on one hand, it sucks, because sometimes the connection is awful and you have to deal with it, or just opt to not play at all. On the other hand, I am very grateful that it is even possible to do it at all. We shit on Parsec a lot, but it gets the job done very well for what it is, and for free too. I can never hate it because of that. I'm just disappointed in its limitations, such as handling keyboards when playing online. Or its cryptic error messages it sometimes has. Or its hardware compatibility limitations for players. Hosting.
What was the creative process in making the main mechanics of SMBZ-G?
The creative process for creating mechanics. I don't know. I don't really have a process. I just think a lot and figure it out. I guess I can try to break down the thought process. To preface, most of my fighting game experience came from an online Korean fighting game called Lost Saga, LS, currently dead in North America, rest in peace. I played that game competitively for about 6 years, so many of its mechanics stick with me. Likewise, Little Fighter 2, LF2, a game similar to Lost Saga, also had a lot of influence on me, as I played that game a lot. Growing up as well with my brother, and the occasional friend, as it was up to 4 players. Energy was the first resource. It was from the first game, and that was from Street Fighter, and many other fighting games that have, what we often simply refer to as, and quat, meter and quat. It was the obvious choice to use as a resource for super specials. At one point, pursuing did not cost Anything. My brother, a high-level competitive fighting game player who has participated in many and even won several tournaments in his time, pointed out how busted it was and that I was underestimating its utility. He encouraged me to make it a part of the energy resource. Later, once supers became a thing, they obviously used energy as well, and that's about it with it. The idea to make energy passively regen came naturally from LF2, whose mana regen automatically. Cinematic rushes were second. I wanted a way to add movement rushes in, but without all the custom absurdity that came with SMBZ-V06's movement rushes. So I thought, what if I make it so that I have cinematic attacks that show off epic parts of the show that I can't recreate in regular gameplay? So the idea of the cinematic rush was born. The next question is, how would it be triggered? Intensity came next. Where I got this idea from was a very good fighting game called Death Vegas, an Adult Swim browser game. It's mostly dead now. Good luck trying to find it. To describe it, it was a simple fighting game with an attack button that you can press high, mid or low. There were also 2 special buttons per character, but let's ignore that for now. Pressing the attack button would flash a vision of where you were going to attack a second or so before the actual attack came out, giving the opponent time to block it, even if they are in the middle of a wind-up of their own telegraphed attack, which would be interrupted if they block. As attacks are blocked, intensity fills in a diamond at the top of the screen. I'm not as original as you thought with this idea now. The more intensity filled, the faster the telegraphed attacks will come out, eventually making them come out as fast as a regular fighting game attack, almost instantly. Additionally, the damage of the next attack is increased by the level of intensity built. I took that idea and repurposed it. Once intensity is filled, you can then gain access to your critical strike, thus consuming the shared resource both players contributed to by fighting each other. A word about critical strikes. They used to be a form of super attack in the first SMBZ. They served as a means to start movement rushes. They used energy, very simply, so they can be used over and over again. This was excessive in the new style of SMBZ-G, so moving them to use intensity fit well with the overall feel of SMBZ, having critical strikes show up as a crescendo to a fight after it has built up intensity, rather than just being thrown out rapidly. As a more organic way to start cinematic rushes, the stun bar was made, along with full stun strikes. Self-explanatory, I feel. If there was a thought process to it, I can't remember. I don't recall there being iterations of this. Pursue was a mechanic with a lot of iterations though. You're familiar with the first version, where you could just do it as a means to maneuver. I wanted to replicate that thing SMBZ does where they run up on a person, but it was just so overdone the way I had it, and abusable. Eventually, I thought about it, boiled it down to the main component of running up on someone, and based it off of the Fire Mario scene where he rushes up and punches Koopa Red in the gut. I don't think that answered your question on what's your creative process. Because I don't have a clearly defined one. I just and quat. Think and quat. But maybe this helped.
What led you to making the current combo system, where when the player loses hit stun, the combo drops?
What led me to create the current combo system? I guess, compared to the old SMBZ game, where hitstun was additive, I felt I was overstepping myself by trying to remake that system. The old system was additive, where, if you do 3 attacks that all do 0.1 seconds of hitstun, you'd give the opponent a total of 0.3 seconds on hitstun. If you hit them with a 1-second hitstun move, you can keep hitting them with moves that wouldn't normally combo because the excess hitstun would fill in the gaps. It was nonsense and ripe for infinites. It was cool though, and I made it so that critical strikes do bonus damage for how much current hitstun the target was in. But all that aside, I Wanted to make a more grounded gameplay, and a traditional hitstun system works perfectly. No point in trying to recreate the wheel here.
How do you feel about the claim that single-player combo practice is believed to be the reason touch of deaths are found more often?
Facts. Single-player combo practice 100% leads to TODs. What else is there to do? You're either labbing out combos or fighting against bots that become more predictable the longer you familiarize yourself with them. Of course, people like that are gonna end up going down the combo lab, TOD route. It makes perfect sense to me.
What is your own opinion on the current update as of the time of writing this, version 1.05?
My opinion of version 1.05 is that it is exactly what I envisioned the game to end up being like. At an intermediate skill level. At an advanced skill level, it is a touch of death nonsense. While I do find it incredibly impressive to see combo fiends pull off combos that I didn't even think were possible, I do find it disheartening that that is the direction the skill levels are taking the current state of the game is that almost every character has a near touch of death. If not infinite, I wish to attempt to do the impossible and fix it so that more thoughtful gameplay is optimal, rather than reciting muscle memory combos.
The skins update so far is being very well received, and according to some, could bring a whole new set of audiences. Do you have any plans to allow further modding abilities, stage editing, adding custom characters, etc.?
I do not have plans for any further modding, except for damage modding. I want to make a system where the damage numbers for everyone's moves are external from the game, so you can load in your own version of a pre-existing character and make their moves hit differently. Beyond that, I won't be adding more modding tools because I cannot. The game wasn't built modularly enough to allow for modding. I would have to rebuild the game with modding in mind to allow for that. Unfortunately, SMBZ-G, much like SMBZ-V 0.6, has been a learn-as-you-go experience for me. Most of my game development skill come from working on SMBZ-G. Thus, a lot of my mistakes have also been made within SMBZ-G to a foundational level. Those errors are what prevent me from making it as modable as people would like.
How do you feel about your community so far? How have they been in welcoming or allowing new players to develop?
With few exceptions, the community has been lovely. They do offer a welcoming smile to newcomers, and offer help when necessary. Some are rude to try to be funny. Some are just dicks, which I snap at whenever I see it to make sure everyone knows I'm not interested in fostering that kind of community. Sidebar: I've been in communities like that where they are hostile to new players or withhold information just to feel superior. I just recently experienced that earlier this year when I found a private North American server for my favorite dead game, Lost Saga. The website had very little information on how to download and play the game. I had to go to the Discord to figure it out, which again had little information. So, I had to ask the community, who all were jerks about it and trolling the entire time. Eventually a mod came and just said, and quote, "Go read the info channel and quote," to which I informed them that it had little information, to which they then realized that it was missing very vital information that used to be there until they removed in a recent update and forgot that it was important because everyone they knew already knew how to install the game. They apologized and fixed it, and that's the only reason I got to play. But yay. I don't ever want it to get like that.
What future plans do you have for SMBZ-G?
I just wanna work on it here and there, adding new major characters and requested features. I want to eventually drop it all together and start focusing primarily on my own games, but I don't want to release the source code. I've been warned many times not to, for many reasons, by many people, including business owners and senior developers, etc. What I want to do is get it to a state where every reasonable request is fulfilled, like canonical major characters, decent moves for longevity and balance changes. That way, it's a game that people can look at and say and quote, "Yay. This is a complete, neat game with which I have little complaints. I can put it on my trophy wall and move on." Life isn't so simple though. Creating my own game, original IP, art, music stages, no. Nintendo or rip-offs, is a huge undertaking. In comparison, SMBZ-G has a thriving community that looks up to me. I have a lot of what I want from game development from SMBZ-G. It makes me happy, and feel fulfilled. So, I keep working on it for that purpose too. It's just, there will always be a ceiling, and a looming legal threat. So, eventually, I want to make my own game, one with online multiplayer, a balanced fighting system, etc., that I can fully dedicate myself to. One day. I just don't wanna let down the SMBZ-G fans. I want to leave them in a good spot.
A common topic in your server is the upcoming Cataclysm, as the community has dubbed it. Can you describe what you plan to do?
The Cataclysm will attempt to bring the game back to the original idea of being less touch of death, TOD, and more neutral, as I find it will be more healthy for the game as a whole. Say what you will, but in my opinion, TODs are scummy and toxic, despite the skill requirement. I respect the skill requirement, don't get me wrong, but it's a fighting game, not a piano recital. I'd prefer that skill set be used more appropriately, like in a Dance Dance Revolution styled game. TOD are toxic to new players, as it doesn't allow them to play or experiment if they fight anyone who knows how to do TODs. It makes a whole level of elite players that are on a whole other game than anyone else, separating the community. Then, at a high level, spectating becomes predictable. If you can optimally do the same TOD to kill the opponent, why wouldn't you? I don't appreciate TODs. Sidebar. Coming from my days playing Lost Saga, LS, I was a pseudo-top player. Difference between me and most people, though, is that I didn't use TODs. They were a thing in that game too, and the meta. I didn't put in the time to learn them, plus the characters I enjoyed didn't have them, and I didn't want to play characters I didn't enjoy to learn a playstyle I didn't enjoy just to win. I didn't wanna sweat. I enjoyed the game, and I especially enjoyed the neutral and the mind games. What was satisfying to me was reading and outplaying my opponent, not just getting the combo starter and ending their life. Despite my disadvantage due to my choice in characters and playstyle, I still could beat top players, who were really mad that and quat, scrub and quat, could beat them. I'd get comments like and quat, I suck. That's why I don't wanna learn combos, and quat, or and quat. I refuse to adapt and quat, despite my whole gameplay is adapting to my opponents, rather than doing the same thing over and over again that I practice in training mode. From that history, I think that also solidified a distaste toward TODs. It also fuels my interest in making a game that isn't TOD-centric. There are so many games out there that cater to that demographic already. I want a game that caters to my interests. So why not make it? I have the ability. So, yay. I'm finna do it.
How proud of you are SMBZ-G currently? Do you still have some things you wish you could implement but can't for one reason or another? What inspired you the most to make the SMBZ-G game you know and love today? Around what time frame was the original SMBZ game that was scrapped up to version 0.0? Around what time frame was the original SMBZ game that was scrapped up to version 0.6? What made you abandon the original SMBZ game? What do you use most as creative inspiration when making the current SMBZ-G? What update and time period did you notice the player base to really begin to take off? What was your original vision for SMBZ-G? What playstyle were you originally aiming for when making it? In your own opinion, do you think people should play the game or read the Google Sites page first? In your own imagination, how do you imagine first impressions going for those who refuse to read the site's page? How do you feel about having to use Parsec to have your How do you feel about having to use Parsec to have your player base fight one another? What was the creative process in making the main mechanics of SMBZ-G? What led you to making the current combo system, where when the player loses hit stun, the combo drops? How do you feel about the claim that single-player combo practice is believed to be the reason touch of deaths are found more often? What is your own opinion on the current update as of the time of writing this, version 1.05? The skins update so far is being very well received, and according to some, could bring a whole new set of audiences. Do you have any plans to allow further modding abilities, stage editing, adding custom characters, etc.? How do you feel about your community so far? How have they been in welcoming or allowing new players to develop? What future plans do you have for SMBZ-G? A common topic in your server is the upcoming Cataclysm, as the community has dubbed it. Can you describe what you plan to do? How proud of you are SMBZ-G currently? Do you still have some things you wish you could implement but can't for one reason or another? Any final things to say or plug? Any future projects or updates you wish to talk about? Any final things to say or plug? Any future projects or updates you wish to talk about?
One is currently out. It's a mobile game, only on Android at the moment. I plan to release it on iOS next year. Episode 2, new maps, enemies, modes, weapons, content, will start development next year. This is a fully original IP made by myself and my brother as the artist and conceptor. It is a labor of love, but this we can actually monetize, so the more eyes on it the better, if you ask me. The basis of Get Nuts is, as a squirrel, collect and protect your nuts in high-speed cartoon action. As for upcoming projects, Unity and recently released their solution for netcode, so I will be spending some time, once I'm free from SMBZ-G for a while, learning how it works and seeing how hard it is to make competent netcode. Likewise, I will also be trying my hand at God of War, once it releases sometime in December, or maybe Q1 2023. It also has netcode, and is open source. If I end up liking it more than Unity, I make all new projects using it. As a practice project, I plan to recreate Melody Duel.
With that, I just have one final conclusive statement. SMBZ-G, despite what some would consider minor flaws, some minor complaints, and even some slight balance issues, continues to uphold the legacy of SMBZ. That feeling you get watching a fight scene is now available to be lived out through this fan game, and that by itself is something to appreciate, especially the amount of hard work that went into this fan game. Anyways, thank you all for watching this video essay. I know this isn't my usual type of content, not that I've really been doing traditional stream highlights, but I plan to return to those this summer and starting my channel off with a bang. If you enjoy this type of content or even just variety content in general, I'd appreciate you guys throwing me even just a like or a subscribe, as I do my best to post semi-often, but due to a lot of real-life events, it may hold my uploads back just a tiny bit. With all that, all links in the description. Thank you, Zethros, for the interview. I hope you all have a fantastic day.